Once again, familiarity has been restored. Once again, we feel like we're in a normal place and doing normal things. But last week, things once again returned to that pattern as people started watching the Olympics and started complaining about the level of coverage. It wasn't right that you couldn't watch on the BBC all the sports, all the events, all the activities, all the time. Not that I've ever quite worked out how you managed to do that, as many of them are simultaneous, but people were grumbling and groaning that the world was somehow not what it used to be. And if only we could go back to the good old days, then all would be well. Not an unfamiliar sense in those words, with ones that have been said for thousands of years. And on Sunday, we heard in one of our readings about the people of Israel grumbling and groaning in the wilderness, a story that continued to be unfolded in our readings yesterday. The people of Israel had escaped from the slavery in Egypt, from that struggle that they had had, crying out to God to save them. They had passed through the Red Sea and were wandering in the wilderness, journeying eventually towards the promised land. But they weren't satisfied. They weren't happy. Things weren't like they used to be. They no longer had the bread. They no longer had the food. They no longer were able to have the things that they took for granted when they were slaves in Egypt. And they grumbled and they groaned to Moses, and Moses shared their woes with God. And God then fed them where they were, in that place, in the midst of their depression and their frustration. He feeds them with manna, bread sent from heaven. We also heard at the weekend of Jesus being sought by the crowds. He had fed them with the bread. He had fed 5,000 of them, a story which we heard again yesterday from Matthew's Gospel. And Jesus nourishes and feeds them and then moves on, and they seek him out. They seek to discover where he is and ask him for yet more signs, asking him to feed them further. And Jesus encourages them to see that he is the bread of life, that it is being with him that nourishes and sustains them, not the feeding with the bread, not the feeding with the signs, but his presence, his love and his care for them is what they truly need. As we too continue our journey from lockdown and our response to COVID, so sometimes we are found saying we wish to return to the good old days. If only things could be once more as they were, then all would be well. The danger with that looking back constantly to the past, yearning for what used to be, is that we fail to recognize the journey that we've been on and what we have discovered about ourselves and about God through that journey. We fail to recognize the reality of the situation we are now in and to see the good that is around us. We fail to recognize and to discern that God is with us. Our hearts and our minds are overwhelmed by that desire for something to somehow be different, to be restored, to return to the good old days. Our readings this weekend encourage us not to look back, but instead to look around us and to look for the signs of God with us now, in the reality of the situation we face, in the midst of where we are, and to recognize that throughout our journey, God is always with us, and he will nourish us and provide us with what we truly need, which is his presence, his love, and his care. So the next time you find yourself wishing that things were as they used to be, perhaps pause and look at what is good about where we are, and see if you can discern that presence of God with you today, feeding, nourishing, and caring for you, providing you with what you truly need, whatever is happening around us, whatever the world is saying and doing.